In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make a better Launchpad light show using MIDI clips, including tips, tricks, and shortcuts you may not already know. Let's get into it. Hello there, my inspirations. My name is Inspirasper, and today I'm going to teach you how to make a good Launchpad light show using MIDI clips. That is to say, I won't be making light effects using Ableton's MIDI effects, but rather I will be teaching you tips and tricks on how to make a better Launchpad light show in a MIDI clip using your piano roll. For those of you who don't already know, a Launchpad light show in a MIDI clip at the end of the day looks something like this. This is my Chainsmokers Closer Launchpad light show, where each of these notes is a button on my Launchpad that lights up. And before some of you ask, because I get this question all the time, yes, you can assign a MIDI clip light effect to the touch of a button on your Launchpad. So you can make a Launchpad light effect this way and assign it to a button, but that requires Max for Live in order to do so. And in order to use Max for Live, you need Ableton Suite, and I think maybe Standard, but you have to buy Max for Live separately. I'm not quite sure. Maybe someone can verify me on that. The point is, you cannot do this in Light, unfortunately. So now that that's cleared up, let's go ahead and get into it, and let's learn how to make a Launchpad light show using MIDI clips from scratch. Naturally, the first step is to open up a new Ableton Live session, and then go into my arrangement view. I'm gonna delete one of these audio tracks and one of these MIDI tracks. The next step would be to drag your song into Ableton on top of your audio track. Don't drag it onto your MIDI track. Next, double click on your song, go to the bottom of Ableton where it says Warp, and unclick it. Then at the top left of Ableton, make sure that your Ableton session BPM is the same of that of your song. For example, in my case is 128. Make sure Ableton's BPM is 128. You want them to be the same. Ultimately, this will greatly help you synchronize your light effects to your song, and it's really just to help you out at the end of the day. Next, we need to set up our MIDI track to receive MIDI input and output from our Launchpad. Then arm your MIDI track for recording. This is very important. Next, we're going to create a MIDI clip that covers the entire length of our song. Or, if you do plan on assigning these light effects to a touch of a button, make each MIDI clip the size of each of your samples, since you would want one light effect per button press. For now, I'm just going to do the entire length of my song, but just keep that in mind if you do plan on using these light effects in your cover. So to do that, I'm going to click and drag on my MIDI track, and then I'm going to right click and insert MIDI clip, or you could do Command-Shift-M on a Mac. I believe the equivalent would be Control-Shift-M on a Windows. In case this piano roll didn't appear, double click on your MIDI clip, and you should have this piano roll. You can move your mouse here, click and drag upwards to expand your piano roll so you can see it a little bit better. Now, before we get into this, I highly suggest you turn on your MIDI editor preview. It's this little headphone icon at the top left of your piano roll. Right now mine is blue, which is good. We want it to be blue. Blue is on. We want this to be on, so make sure that this icon is blue. You can just click it to toggle it. What this will allow us to do is, assuming our MIDI track is armed for recording, which it should be, and assuming this is on, we can press any button we want on our Launchpad, and then press the right arrow key on our computer, and as you can see, Ableton will draw in these notes wherever this orange bar is in your piano roll. You can click anywhere to move your orange bar, so this can be super helpful if you want to make really quick light effects in rapid succession. So that's one way to draw in notes. If you want to draw in some notes quickly, you can change from your cursor selector tool to your pencil by pressing the B button on your computer, and then you can press the same button to switch back. The pencil tool allows you to draw in notes wherever you like. So those are two different ways to draw in notes. Each of these notes at the left on this piano roll represent a button on your Launchpad, starting with the bottom left at C1, going all the way to the top right at D#6, it looks like. So these 64 notes represent our 64 buttons on our Launchpad. And so drawing in notes basically means we're lighting up those buttons. Now, whenever you press play in Ableton, you'll notice that this black bar moves across your piano roll. Whatever notes are currently being played as this black bar scrubs through your piano roll will light up your buttons on your Launchpad. So I like to think of making light effects as having different frames, and these frames give your lights the sense of movement. So, for example, if I were to draw in a light effect that starts at the bottom left corner of my Launchpad and then shoots to the bottom right corner of my Launchpad in just a straight line across that row, and as I press play, you notice that one light lit up after the other, because one lights up after another in each of these frames, if that makes any sense. That's more or less the basic concept of making these light shows. To change this grid size, you can press Command 2 to make these grids wider. Command 2 on a Mac or Control 2 on a Windows. If you look here at the bottom right corner, we're currently set at 1/2. The bigger the number means the wider the interval. And conversely, I can press Command 1 on a Mac or Control 1 on a Windows to make the grid size smaller. And of course, the smaller the number means the shorter the interval. I can only make it small up to a certain point until my window can't really fit any grid size smaller. So to fix that, we can go to this bottom right corner in this rectangle. We can left click and drag down to zoom in. And of course, if you were to left click and drag up, you zoom out. The further we zoom in, the smaller the interval we can get. This leads me to my first suggestion that I would like to make. Make your light effects faster than you think you should. Looking back at my older light shows, I like some of the light effects and maybe some of the patterns and designs, but I felt like some of them were just a little too slow and they didn't quite fit the energy of the song, at least not in my opinion. So to fix that, ever since I've tried to make my light effects a little faster. It sort of gives a feel of punchiness and energy. Plus that way you can essentially fit more light effects in a given amount of time than you normally would if you were just to have used one light effect in a small period of time. So in my opinion, that's what I found out I like to make light effects a little bit faster than I think I should. But that being said, don't make them too fast. You have to give your viewers something to process. If you just make your light effects go by at the blink of an eye, then they can't really appreciate what you just made. So try and find a nice middle ground. You can change the length of your light effect that you make by highlighting your notes. If you want to highlight multiple notes, you can highlight one section by clicking and dragging with your selector tool, and you can move to the rest of your notes, hold select, and continue to click and drag. Once you have all of your desired notes selected, you can go to this bottom left corner and you'll notice these two buttons that have the number 2 on them. This :2 halves the length of your light effects. It essentially makes it 2 times faster. Now this *2 button does the exact opposite. It doubles the length of your notes, so it makes it 2 times slower. If you don't want to half or double the speed of your light effects, you can go to the top here where there'll be this MIDI stretch marker arrow, and you can move that left or right, and you'll notice that that shortens or elongates the length of my light effect depending how much I drag it. This gives you a little more precision and more freedom when changing the length of your light effects. If you want to change the color of your light effects, you can do that a few ways. One way I prefer is to hover over any of my notes, as long as they're all highlighted, and hold Command on a Mac, I believe again the equivalent would be Control on a Windows, and just drag up and down. You'll notice right here at the top will be my velocity number, and you'll have to memorize these numbers, but for example, I know that, 49 is a nice purple, for example. So now if I were to play my same light effect, it's now purple. Another thing you can do to make your light effects a little more interesting is you can go down here at the bottom left corner and hit this reverse button, and that does exactly what you think it would do. It reverses the light effect that you just made. So for example, on my same light effect, it used to start at the bottom left corner and went to the bottom right. Now if I were to play it, my light effect is reversed. Another interesting thing I like to do is to add fades to my light effects. Those of you who have been around this channel for a long time probably know what I mean by this, but just in case you're new, let me explain. Most colors on the Launchpad have 3 brightness levels. That'd be high, medium, and low. So for, like I said, most colors, you can make a given light effect, you can copy your light effect and just push it back and delay it however long you want. And you can do this one of 2 ways. You can either actually copy and then click where you want it to be and then click paste, or one way that's a lot quicker that I prefer, you can highlight all of your notes, you can hold the Alt button, you can click and drag and let go. What you can then do here is, assuming that your original light effect was the brightest level, you can then make this second light effect the medium brightness level. And then if you want, you can repeat it again for the dimmest brightness level. And so this is my result. And so what I've just done is more or less created a trail on my light effect by copying the same light effect and delaying it just a little bit and lowering its brightness level. I think it gives it this nice little trail. Here's a trick you can do to save a significant amount of time if you want to make symmetrical light effects. Let's say I want to make a light effect where whatever happens on the left side of the Launchpad will also happen symmetrically on the right half. If I wanted to do this, I only have to do half of the work. And by that I mean I only have to make 1/2 of the Launchpad. So let's say I wanted to make this light effect, for example. So would I draw in each note individually for the entire Launchpad? The answer is no. I only have to make the light effect for half of the Launchpad. So let's say I make it on the left half of the Launchpad. What I can then do is highlight all of my notes. I can either copy and paste it, or again, remember I can hold Alt and drag it, and then I can click this inverse button, and then I can drag it to the right half of the Launchpad. And now if I were to play my result, I have a completely symmetrical light effect. The reasoning for this is picture a vertical line straight down the middle of the Launchpad. The inverse button essentially takes all of the light effects that I made on the left half and flips it by 180 degrees, and then when I moved it to the right half of the Launchpad, it made it completely symmetrical. You can use this inverse button to save you a lot of time if you want to make symmetrical light effects, or you can also use it to make some really interesting patterns and designs. I highly recommend you just play around with it. If you want to elongate the length of your notes, hover over the right side of any one of your notes until your cursor turns into a bracket, and then left click and drag. And as long as this note is on, the light will stay on. As soon as this note stops, the light will turn off. Here's a trick that I learned that I really like to use. Essentially, instead of using linear time, you can give your light effects a feel of acceleration by changing the timing of the beginning, end, or maybe even the middle of your light effect. So let's say, for example, on this light effect, let's highlight, say, the first, 3 notes of this light effect. That is, the first 3 frames or grids, whatever you want to call it. Make sure you highlight all of the notes that you want that come within the first 3 frames. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be 3, of course, I'm just making up this number off of the top of my head. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna half the length of that light effect, or I'm gonna speed it up times 2. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drag the rest of my light effect so it's up flush against the rest of that light effect. And then I'm actually gonna take the last, let's say 2 frames of this light effect and double it this time. And then I'm gonna play my result. And ultimately what I just did was I sort of gave it a feel of acceleration. And of course, you don't always have to use this. I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying the option is there to kind of play around with the timing a little bit. It's a subtle difference, but I think it makes a big impact on your light show. I highly recommend you go ahead and try and make something new and original. Make something that you genuinely don't think will look good. I challenge you to do that. You might be surprised at the result. The worst thing that happens is you scrap your light effect and you start over from scratch. The point is, if you don't like what you make, then don't use it. But if you go out of your way to try something new, you might be surprised at the result. I highly recommend you try new designs, try new color combinations, try different speeds and lengths, try to inverse different parts of the song. Just kind of experiment with it. Try and listen to a part of a song and picture what light effect should go with what you hear. It sounds a little weird, but I like to hear a part of a song and just envision what that sound looks like. It's something that takes a little bit of practice, but eventually you can easily make whatever light effect you're thinking of in your brain and put it on your Launchpad. And those are some of my tips and tricks to change the length of your notes, to elongate your notes, change the color, inverse, reverse, maybe add some fading. I think the main takeaway here is to try and make fast, energetic light effects and try and fit a bunch of light effects in. But again, not too many. Either stick to a color theme or make a bunch of colors. You can repeat a few light effects, sometimes repeating patterns can be a nice homage to earlier in the light show, but don't be too repetitive. Just overall be original and creative. Once you put a lot of time into this, you'll start to get the hang of it. I mean, remember guys, this was me 2.5 years ago, and this is what I've made most recently. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm proud of the results after 2.5 years of work. And if you want, you can get there too. So that'll do it. I hope you learned a thing or two. I really appreciate you watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye.